Okay, welcome everyone. I am planning to do a brief demo on the new starterkit theme that is proposed to be added to core as an experimental theme in 9.2. And we are looking for feedback on this at the moment. So I have an environment installed right now. So I have taken a branch from the merge request, which is associated to this issue. The issue number is 3050384, in case you want to download that or pull that branch rather yourself. And how you do that is you go on the issue, and there's on the bottom of the issue summary, there's a button show commands, which will give you commands which you can use to add a new remote to the Git repository of your Drupal installation, and we'll also fetch the branches from here. So that's what I have done on this environment. And now I can run these commands that are listed here as API changes in the issue summary. So I'm going to start by
even in the video. So for the recording, you might want to enlarge it and just point out where the commands are on the issue again, a lot more still.
Okay, maybe it's now a little bit easier to read. And so I'm copying the first command here, which is the help command. So I'm going on my terminal. And so I have this local branch here, as you can see. Like that, and copy and paste. So if I run this command, you can see all of the different options that can be used with this new command. Over here, we have an example command which we can use. I'm going to copy that to generate a new theme, and oops. Delete that. Okay, so this is going to generate a new theme with the machine name custom_theme, human readable name custom theme, and description custom theme generated from a starterkit theme. It's going to be generated in the themes folder in the root directory of Drupal. I'm going to remove this one because themes is already the default folder where the theme will be generated. So that is not necessary. And it seems like I have already run this command. So the theme cannot be generated. So let's delete the previous theme first. And I'm going to run that command again. And it seems like now we are not getting an error message. So a theme should be generated. So I'm going to that folder right now and see what is inside here. So as you can see, I have some files generated using that machine name that I just used on the command. I'm going to open the info.yaml file so that we can see what is in there. And you can see that the name is generated based on what I gave on the command, and everything else is using the machine name that we were using. So we have some library extents, which we have actually inherited from Classy. So this theme is based on Classy as it is now in Drupal 9.1. And we're using that kind of as the starting point that we give for the generated theme. And so this is all coming from there. You can see the description. We set a core version requirement for Drupal 9. And essentially, this is sort of the starting point for your theme. And when Drupal 10 comes, it is the maintainers, the persons who generated this theme responsibility to make this compatible with the next version of this one. of this team. Also, something worth mentioning is that right now we are only providing an option where stable is used as the base theme of this generated theme. In future, we could potentially allow that to be configured based on preference, but right now that's the only option we provide. Essentially, that the code that is generated in theme is built in a way that allows us to provide that types of configuration options in future based on what type of feedback we get from people. Then if you go look at the CSS folder, you can see that there's some files. This is also inherited from Classy. And we can see that there's quite a bit of some specific CSS. And something that we've learned during the Drupal 8 lifecycle, one of the key reasons that we want to actually move from using Classy into using starterkit theme is that this markup has been mostly frozen since Drupal 8 released. And now that we are moving to this new approach of providing starterkit themes, we could actually change that markup. And the reason for not being able to change this is that when you use Classy as your base theme, you essentially inherit all of the CSS and markup from there. And any designs or any CSS that you write in your custom theme extending that theme then essentially depends what is defined here. And those designs or those expectations could break if we changed something. This brings some interesting opportunities for us because of it allows us to remove and refactor some of the CSS. It allows us to also provide some more specific CSS for the areas where we think that would be most helpful. And we actually have quite a few open issues from the Drupal 8 development lifecycle where we wanted to provide some improvements to the Classy markup or the default markup of Drupal, and they didn't end up getting done. And I don't think many people have worked on those since Drupal 8 because of it's not really feasible to do since Drupal 8 shipped because of we didn't really have this place where we could do that type of development. So that will so essentially providing a starter kit will hopefully allow us to start working on those issues again. So now that I've generated this theme, I'm actually going to go on my Drupal installation and I'm going to enable that theme. So I have quite a few themes here because I have the testing themes visible, but we can see the custom theme over here, which we just generated using the CLI tool. I'm going to install that. And now that I've installed it, I can set it as my base theme, as my preferred theme. This is a tool from that it's not part of core. It's like a personal tool which I have, so I can test different themes quickly without going to the appearance page. And now we can see we are using the custom theme, which we just generated. So this is not right now. This is actually, I mentioned earlier that we are using Classy as the sort of starting point for this. We are not using Classy directly for this at the moment. So there is a new hidden theme in the core themes directory called starterkit_theme, which is the source that we use at the moment for the starterkit theme generated, for the starterkit generated themes. And this is essentially a copy of Classy in its current state. And we can start then, immediately after this is committed, we can start making changes to that and start dividing from Classy. Here. here, this is the hidden team, and essentially pretty much everything is the same as it is in the generated theme, because it's just basically copied from here. We read the YAML, we parse it, and then we make some modifications, and then we rewrite it in the generated theme. So some other opportunities that are interesting that this brings is that we are using Classy in quite a few tests still. And so let me actually find that. Team typo there. So we have quite a few tests that are using Classy at the moment. We have an open issue to change that in a follow-up of an issue where we forced all of the tests to specify which team they would like to use for testing. So Classy, before that change, Classy was the default, which was used for all tests. And in a process where we are now trying to remove Classy from core at some point, we first made all of the tests specify which team they would like to use for testing. For most teams, that will be Stark, because they shouldn't be testing anything that is too specific to markup. So they can essentially just use a theme which is going to be changed frequently. But then there are teams that want that more opinionated markup, and they also don't want necessarily to have the changes in their markup. So they are still using Classy as a result. And so if you're removing Classy from core, it means that there's not really a good way necessarily for those tests to use some sort of default markup which has some classes, something that allows the tests to sort of get a better sense of what is rendered on the page. Because, for example, if you don't have any classes or any IDs on the page, everything is in divs and paragraph tags. It's very hard to make assertions on specific elements. So Classy sort of provided a default markup which they could then use to make sure that the page is rendered as they expect. But now that the starterkit theme is sort of its new theme, we could theoretically, if we think it's a good idea, we could allow tests to use it as the testing theme. And that's something we could do even in core to reduce our dependency on Classy. And so that could be the first step. We would essentially move all of the tests that are depending on Classy to use starterkit theme. And then after that, we can see what we do potentially to remove that dependency on starterkit theme. So that's just interesting avenue that we realized as we started working on this. So I've been talking for a while. Do we have any questions from the folks that have joined? Anything that you would like to see, or anything that is unclear?
What's the special sauce for making a theme starter-kittable?
So right now, it's hard coded the specific theme. So we essentially here we define the source theme that we're using. However, in future, since this is the code after this is not strictly depending on any independent theme, we could allow that to be configured as part of the arguments provided for the CLI. And we could even limit that. We could restrict the themes based on some configuration option, which we make available in info YAML files. However, I think there's another step which is important for us to do when we do that, is to first make sure that we have a little bit better coverage in terms of what we can actually do on the generation time. Because right now, the steps taken on the generation have been defined based on the requirements of the starterkit theme. And there are certainly things that are that are common and would be required for other teams to work. For example, if we wanted to use Olivero as a starter kit theme, we would have to support the config and generating the machine names and everything correctly in that directory. There are probably other things here as well. Like I could imagine maybe there's like, for example, breakpoint seems to have some naming that is specific to Olivero. So we would have to take care of making sure that those things can be generated correctly. Something else that I discussed earlier with some folks on the issue is that we think that it would be a good idea when we allow other teams to become starter kit teams, that we allow them to extend the generation process so that they can define their own generation steps, generator steps, which allows them to generate features that we are not supporting in this tool. And that essentially would open the door to a broader potential, because we could have more teams use this than if we limit it to the generator steps that we have defined here. Does that help?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the step one is to make it work with this one team. And when we get more feedback, then we can allow other teams to use this as well. And what is interesting actually is that Mike Hertrell, one of the initiative coordinators for the Olivero team, he actually posted a blog post on sub-teaming Olivero, and it was using the starter kit approach that we are using, but with manual steps. So that was interesting, because that brings up the case that maybe it is something that we should support, maybe restricted to the starter kit team and Olivero as the next step. And then after that, we can look into making it a generic thing or supporting other teams. Any other questions? Any other things that you would like me to demo or cover? I know some people joined late, so if there's something that you would like to demo me from the beginning, I can also do that if there was something that was missing from there.
I joined very late. I didn't know this was happening. This is cool. I guess maybe just like, could you summarize in a sentence or so, like what the big deal is about the starter theme and why people should be excited about it as like a closing thing?
Yeah. So I personally think the most exciting thing is just the opportunity that it gives us to modernize the default markup that we provide to people, because Classy has been basically frozen since Drupal 8.0 released. And now that we make this change, we can start making changes to our markup pretty much without taking too much into consideration the backwards compatibility aspects of it, because of every team that is generated using this they will stay the same until they generate a new team where they start from it. So we don't have to worry about teams that has been already generated using this. Rather, we just test it when you generate a new team that those continue working.
So
that's the big deal.
Yeah, so it's empowering core developers to actually change markup without breaking downstream code.
Yeah, and the big deal for the users is that so our markup is not necessarily matching the expectations that they have now, because we have been unable to provide an experience. We have lots of enthusiastic people who would like to make changes to our code, fix bugs, and make improvements, provide more opinionated starting points to features that we did not have time to do before Drupal 8.0 shipped. And now that we provide this, we give them the opportunity to do that, and we can also give that experience we can give people who are creating teams to Drupal that starting point from now on.
Great. Another question I have, and I really apologize if you've already covered this, but so knowing that end users are going to basically end up with the generated theme from whatever version of Drupal they started with. So like one person who started from 9.1 will get this theme. One person who started from 9.4 will get this theme. One person who started from 10 will get this theme.
Yep.
If there's a bug fix or there's a security update or something else that is like, it's a really good idea, even if you generated your theme 2 years ago, you get this change. What is the process for communicating that out to people so that they know, or like, are we tooling for that at all? Or is it kind of like a hope they're following the security list? Like what's the flow for that?
So first of all, so we control, because so Twig is a language which we compile into PHP. So we control that process as part of Drupal core. So if there's a security issue, regardless of this change, it would be probably a good idea to handle that on the generation time when we compile PHP Twig into PHP, because it is already possible for front-end developers and module authors to override templates. So we don't really know if we ship a new template or fixing a template, whether that actually ends up on sites.
Fair point. Yeah.
So it's sort of making it more severe, but because of there's going to be even less people that we can ship those simple types of fixes. But we would probably have to do that anyway. Luckily, we haven't had any security issues which would have required anything like that since Drupal 8 has shipped, or at any point actually, as long as Twig has been involved. So that's a positive thing. It obviously doesn't guarantee that it wouldn't be necessary in future, but we have hope that we could handle it at that point. Bug fixes are more tricky, and that's where it might not be necessary, or it might not be worthwhile for us to, on the compile time, try to provide a fix for our users. But it's really challenging. It's been really hard for us to find any of those bug fixes since Drupal 8 shipped that we could actually provide for our users, because of it's really hard to anticipate what are the changes that it's going to cost, like how is it going to trickle down on those sub themes extending this. And also sometimes it's like, for example, even if you're providing accessibility fix, like some of them you might expect then to behave that way on your site, and you might find it unexpected to change into something else. So it is really hard for us to kind of make those decisions, and that will take effect on like hundreds of thousands of Drupal sites potentially.
Right.
And we don't know like how many of them, we don't know any percentage, like how many of them would be successful on shipping. So it's been only a handful of changes that we've been able to ship during Drupal.
Yeah, I guess the point of this though is that we can now start doing that much faster and more robustly, right? So
yeah, like, because at least the new teams will then have those fixes,
right? Because
right now it's like limiting us from shipping those to anyone.
Exactly.
So it's sort of it's a trade-off. I think there is some opportunity for us to potentially provide tooling around showing you changes that has happened since you started from the starterkit team.
Yeah, something like even if it like every release there was a diff generated that you could manually review or something. That's very janky. Yeah. But you know what I mean? It's just like, because we're kind of swinging the pendulum from like core is frozen, we can't make any changes, but once we do make a change, at least all themes benefit, or all the themes that came from Classy benefit, to this part, which is like, we can make as many breaking changes as we need to, but if there's something that would be really good for all of our users to get as a fix, they're not going to get it unless they do manual work. And so I think just some mechanism to make sure that that's communicated maybe as part of the release notes, or I don't know, just so people can know like, ooh, I better add this new $ attributes thing so I get stuff. I don't know, just as an example. I know we don't use $signs or, but you know what I mean? Like, or, core used to include this JavaScript library that's now known as insecure. So you should remove that line from your header PHP or whatever, like that kind of thing. So cool. Okay. I was just curious if that had been discussed and if there was a flow for end users to get the benefit out of this system, but sounds like we're still working out some of those, like, it's not an impossibility, but it's just working out the mechanics of how that would go.
I can see that on the participant list, we have folks who are definitely like writing themes for customers. So I would be interested to hear what is the expectation from you on this? Like, is that a tool that you would use? Like, are you interested to compare what types of changes to the core markup has happened since you generated your theme from a starter kit? Or is it like a good idea in theory, but something that in practice would not be used?
I'm also curious. Like, is this a theoretical problem or is this an actual problem?
Because I've heard it brought up. The reason I'm asking is because I've heard it brought up as a theoretical problem multiple times in discussions, but as a practical problem, I've not heard anyone point it out yet. And that's why it would be good to try to validate it, how people will actually write themes for companies and sites, how they feel about that.
I think it's an entry-level problem, or a better solution for an entry-level problem. Somebody who's just starting out with Drupal theming, to be able to not run a PHP script, but maybe click a button and get a starter theme that is their own. But I mean, from practicality, we don't make our themes children of classy or stable anymore. We just kind of start out with our own base theme.
And could that change if we were able to provide better defaults as part of core? Like if it was actually like more opinionated and something that actually felt like a good starting point?
It may, yeah. Yeah, at this time, I think my developers feel like, stable or classy is too opinionated for them, and they'd rather start with, just like cores, CSS, and templates.
Interesting, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, compared to like a WordPress world where you can spin up a theme off of their latest 2021 or 2022 or whatever, I think that's kind of more where this would be a lot more useful.
Yeah, I think the sort of enterprise-based theme spectrum is still going to continue to thrive even after this. It's much easier to build a base theme in that environment because you can potentially even test changes across your test suite, like all of your sites when you introduce changes to your base theme, or at least you would have a sense of what is being done in most of the sites. Like even if you have tens of sites, you would have some kind of clue what is going on in those. And you could do like a grep. How many of these teams are? How many of these sites are overriding this template? How many of these teams that we have sub-theming this are using this CSS class, something like that? But as the Drupal core maintainers, we don't really have that option. We can do that over contrib, but especially in particular, the team contrib ecosystem in Drupal 8 is not very active. Like there's not that many teams that are actively developed in the contrib ecosystem at the moment. So it doesn't really give us a good sense on what are people actually doing.
That makes total sense.
I was going to say that the thing that excited me the most about this was trying to be able to take advantage of all of the, for example, accessibility improvements that we've made with Olivero, and to be able to build on that, because right now we're not really encouraging Olivero as a base theme, but I like if this is moving towards a place where if I'm just spinning up a site for somebody and I want to make it, super accessible, that I could spin that up and then just make a few tweaks and then have a nice site with all of the fancy features of our new fancy theme.
Yeah, I think that's something that we have to explore and see how we could take the most benefit out of this tool when it comes to Olivero and other teams in that category. I think there are some reasons why we probably should support base theming Olivero as well, not just using it as a starter kit theme. I think there are two different use cases. So first is that it sort of depends on the mindset that you have as the teamer that is building upon that starting point. So if you're building like a fully custom design based on like something that designer came up with, but you just want to use Olivero as a starting point because it sort of gives you some good basic principles on layout and menus, which you then feel like you can actually transform them into what the design actually says. And you're just more comfortable starting from sort of like, rather than using like a blank slate, you have a well-defined starting point and you have everything working sort of all the time as you are moving towards having that design implemented. Especially if you are more beginner, that's sort of a more comfortable approach because you don't necessarily know all of the steps that would be necessary to be taken to be there. That's where I think it would be valuable to use the starter kit approach because you could get the markup and the CSS as your starting point, and then you start from there and you go to, in the end, you would have that custom design implemented. But then we have the use case where people actually are just building a site which they want to look decent. They want it to match their brand, but they don't necessarily have any designer. They don't have strictly defined design requirements on their site. They just want to change maybe a color. They maybe want to change their logo and like maybe the font to match their visual guidelines. But that's pretty much what they are up to. And that's where I think it's that providing a base theme provides an interesting opportunity because you depend on the design guidelines and sort of the layouts and the principles set by the base theme. And you want to receive any updates to that theme because you've only written, let's say you've written 100 or 200 lines of CSS just to override a couple of things. The chance of you actually breaking something with that is much lower than when you've built that fully defined design on top of that. And so for that reason, I think we should support two of them, but we somehow need to figure out a way to communicate what are the different use cases for the different approaches. I don't know if you, Matthew, if you know, what is it? It was University of California or someone who was using Olivero. Do you remember that website?
I forget which one it was. I don't remember.
I can check I need to check my, I have a link there. I just need to stop sharing for a second because it's my, okay, so I can share again. So this is a website built using, so it's actually a PACE, seems like to be the organization. It was not University of California. And it's built using Olivero. And as you can see, it's more or less like Olivero, but they've changed a couple of things to match their branding to make it look like what they need. And I think this is the sort of, this is not something that Olivero supports at the moment, but I think this is the type of use case where there would be some potential and there would be a lot of value for us supporting building base themes on Olivero and Bardic. And I'm not sure how to do that safely, how to do that in a way that we don't break these themes. And it's sort of a balance that we need to do. But I think right now we are sort of in, if you think about, like, we are very conservative about this right now. Like, we are not taking any risks on that, and we communicate that we don't support this at all. Please go this other way, copy all of our code and use that as your starting point. But maybe there is a middle ground where we could be a little less conservative on our communication and say that we are going to break, we are going to make changes here, and it could break things on your site. But if you keep the customizations that you do on your sub theme to minimum, that the chances of that happening are going to be small. But yeah,
I joined really late, but I just wanted to see what was going on here, and I was also hoping that this recording is going to be available somewhere because I didn't get to watch the beginning. But I wanted to provide a little bit of insight the whole PHP script to generate a theme is exactly what we've been doing on Emulsify for years now. And so we've got a lot of experience with how this is going to be used. My expectation is that the case where somebody generates a theme based on something and then makes it look like their designs they received from a third-party designer is going to be highly unlikely, because we even though we've created the like kind of default components that come in Emulsify, our first step is basically to delete all of those, because it'll almost never match the markup that we need to produce the designs that are handed over.
Yep.
But the second case you mentioned, where somebody wants to generate a theme and then tweak it, like this example you're showing on the screen, is a great example. Like they don't have maybe they don't even have a full-time developer. They have a volunteer, or you know, they have no designers, but they say, okay, the Olivero theme is a great starting point. Spin that up, and then now let's change the colors to match our color palette or our fonts or things like that. I think that's going to be probably the most used use case, and it could actually produce like an ecosystem of base themes, if you will, but not actual base themes in the traditional Drupal sense of base themes. But like, here's the Olivero starter kit. Here's the, you know, Drupal 10, you know, whatever starter kit that you generate your theme from and then tweak. I think that is going to be probably the most common use case for something like this.
Yep.
And I'd be really curious to talk to the people who have done this, because we have like I said, we have a PHP script that does exactly this. It seems like inside of Emulsify, but it's, you know, specific to Emulsify. It's not part of core.
You mean we'll have done the starterkit theme generator or this site?
Yeah, that's what Emulsify is. You don't actually use Emulsify the theme. It comes with a PHP script to generate a custom theme based on Emulsify that you then, you know, it's your custom code at that point. There's no upstream dependency. Yeah,
let me know if you want to chat about anything. I've done a lot of work on the code as well, so I'm happy to talk about that as well.
Yeah, I would definitely, I mean, for me personally, I don't really do a lot of front-end theming, and, you know, it seems like my options as more of a back-end oriented person are to take some off-the-shelf theme, or to try and, you know, start with some starter base theme where I have to do a lot of work that is unfamiliar, or I could take something that I know has been super well vetted, again, like they like pasted here with Olivero, and then make changes that way and try and kind of, you know, fumble my way around. But it's perfectly fine for a smaller site if it's just, you know, for a friend or something like that. But I don't know if it sounds like other people have definitely different use cases, but I like the start with something that's more vetted rather than some maybe random contrib theme.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the user group that I'm imagining for that use case is I think you are a good example of that. Like someone who's not necessarily a like front-end expert, has some like they have some experience. They've written some CSS and HTML, but they are not necessarily doing it professionally. And that's where I think the value is in like sort of having that vetted starting point and then just starting to make some changes based on that. Any other feedback?
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Doesn't look like we have any additional feedback. If you have any, it seems like there's some messages on chat, which I haven't seen.
I think it's just side chat.
Okay, well, if you don't have any additional questions or comments, feel free to send additional questions on Slack. That we are using the D10 readiness channel for this, and we have meetings bi-weekly over there. It's 7 p.m. UTC. Feel free to join us there. And if you're interested to help, let me know. I can give idea where help could be useful.